2 months after I buried Marisol, Ethan told me to sleep in the garage. "Move your stuff out there, old man," he said, standing in the doorway of the bedroom where I'd held Marisol's hand through 18 months of chemo and where she'd taken her last breath. Lana, his girlfriend, was already riffling through the jewelry box like a woman shopping clearance. "Lana needs closet space," Ethan added, casual as folding a napkin. "Besides, you're used to couches." He wasn't wrong about the couches. I'd slept in recliners, in hospital waiting rooms, on stiff chairs for 700 nights. I'd given up my job at Great Plains Trust to be her caregiver. We'd spent our savings on a few more afternoons. We'd paid for time that wasn't forever. He saw a mattress and a set of dishes. I saw 43 years. They began at 8 the next morning. Ethan took the day off from Meridian Capital, family business, he said, and Lana arrived with 3 suitcases and a stack of boxes. She carried Marisol's reading glasses like a curiosity. "Where do you want me to put this old stuff?" she asked. "Trash," Ethan said without glancing up. He bounced on the new mattress as if testing a trampoline. "Sentimental value doesn't help your back, Dad," he laughed. The word sentimental landed like a slap. They moved as if they were staging a life that belonged to no one before them. A king bed slid into place. A sleek lamp set down on a dresser that hadn't belonged to us 10 minutes earlier. Receipts were left on the nightstand like a proclamation. Outside, Mrs. Delaney watched from her kitchen window. She brought casseroles while chemo schedules 8-hour evenings. When I passed her yard with 2 cardboard boxes and a plastic garbage bag, she lifted a hand in a small, careful wave. I nodded back and felt something that was not quite shame, but not yet fury either. By dusk, my belongings, quilts Marisol never finished, mystery paperbacks, photo albums, were stacked in the far corner of the garage beside a workbench. The hospital bed still sat in the living room. Ethan had nudged it against the wall to make room for his gaming rig. The juxtaposition made me laugh once, a dry sound. Monitors and mother, neon lights and controllers. That night, while laughter and clinking glasses flowed through the thin drywall, I sat on a folding chair next to a space heater and thought about how ordinary cruelty often arrives in ordinary ways. Lana's friends complimented the upgrade. "Open plan everything," someone said. "You have to cut ties with the past." They rinsed plates with the same ease you rinse memories. I had not planned a spectacle. I had planned preservation. For weeks I'd been keeping a quiet archive. Invoices, appeals, a ledger of the specialist's visits. A small recorder hidden in my pocket that had swallowed hours of conversations. Not because I dreamed of revenge, but because I'd learned that grief attracts predators and paperwork fights back. Ethan's voice was in the recording, clipped, easy. "Sleep in the garage, old man," he had said, the syllables folded with laughter. "He's basically our handyman now." Another clip, "Dead people don't need jewelry," had a friend chuckling in the background. The audio sat cold and clear on my phone like evidence you don't know you'll need until you do. I moved through the party like a man in 2 worlds, offering platters, smiling when it was expected, and cataloging details a nurse taught me to notice: names, times, receipts. When their casual cruelty condensed into a pattern, it stopped being just rude. It became a decision. I realized, with a small, terrible precision, that the people in my house believed the grief belonged to them to tidy. The next morning, I went through the manila folders I'd carried out the night before. Medical bills stacked like bricks. Insurance denials clipped to pages. At the back of the filing cabinet, behind the documents no one wanted to look at, was a sealed envelope I'd been told to leave alone until necessary. Marisol had made me promise I would open it only if I had proof I needed the law to hold what the heart couldn't. I held the envelope in both hands. I thought about how easy it would be to let this burn out, to let the mattress go, let the jewelry slide into garage sales, let the house become new wallpaper for someone else's future. I thought about the slow arithmetic of what we'd paid and the small acts that counted for everything. The nights I'd steadied her when she couldn't breathe, the appeals I wrote by lamplight, the calls to pharmacies at 2 in the morning. Ethan walked into the garage in his pajamas, as if this were normal. "Sleep okay out there?" he teased. "Fine," I said. He shrugged and went back in. His phone buzzed. His browser refreshed an auction page. There were listings for small things I'd once wrapped for birthdays. Someone had placed a bid overnight. I put the sealed envelope on the workbench and dialed a number I'd memorized in case practicalities outran patience. When the attorney answered, my voice was steadier than I felt. "It's time," I said. I slid a notice of intent into the copier and fed the first page through. I would not read the letter aloud in that moment. Some secrets are more effective when they incubate. I would give Ethan time and a choice. As I printed the eviction template, the party's laughter blurred into the hum of the garage light. I would serve the papers. I would not announce the reason. I would let his reaction be the reveal. When I creased the notice, the house behind me still smelled faintly of Marisol's peppermint tea. The final line of the night was simple. What you do in daylight always returns to the shadows. Ethan didn't notice the envelope at first. He was too busy smoothing his tie, the same way he used to straighten his homework when he wanted approval. The morning light reflected off his laptop, making him look like a man performing competence rather than living it. I stood quietly in the kitchen doorway. My hand wasn't shaking, but my chest felt tight, the way it used to on the nights I waited for Marisol's lab results. A mix of dread and certainty. "Dad, seriously, I'm in a meeting," he muttered, adjusting his headset. "This will take 10 seconds, I said. I laid the folded paper beside his coffee. It made a soft tapping sound on the table, small, but final. He glanced down casually and froze. "What's this?" he asked, voice too light to be genuine. "Read it." His laptop microphone was still live. Someone on the call said, "Ethan? Everything okay?" He didn't respond. He just stared at the heading. "Notice to vacate, 30 days. He muted the call with a single twitch of his hand, then shut the laptop like it had burned him. "You're kidding." "No." He scanned the paper fast, his eyes flicking left to right, then back again, disbelief turning sharp, confused, then something closer to wounded pride. "You can't evict me. This is my home. You told me I didn't live in it anymore," I said softly. "You told me the garage was my space." For a moment, his face cracked, a tiny seam of guilt, before entitlement patched it back up. "That was a temporary situation," he snapped. "Dad, you're overwhelmed. You're grieving. I'm trying to keep this place afloat. You can't maintain a house on." He cut himself off before saying no income. But it hovered there, unspoken, suffocating the air between us. Lana padded in from the hallway wearing Marisol's robe, her favorite one, pale green cotton, soft from years of use. On Lana, it looked theatrical, costume-like. "What's happening?" she asked, pulling the robe tighter. "Jacob's trying to force me out," Ethan said. Her eyes widened when she read the notice. "This is severe. Harsh. Severe. Practical. Temporary." Amazing how people soften their words when the cruelty came from them first. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked back toward the garage, the cold concrete that had become my bedroom, and waited. It didn't take long. Before noon, my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number. "Mr. Hale," a crisp voice said. "Attorney Collins. I represent your son." The tone told me everything. He thought he was calling a confused old man. He launched into a rehearsed lecture about retaliatory eviction, adult child rights, elder vulnerability. His voice echoed slightly, probably sitting in an office with glass walls and too many degrees on the wall. When he finally paused, I asked, "Before we discuss rights, have you reviewed the property deed?" A long, startled silence. "Why would I need to do that?" "Because the law is only useful if you understand who owns what." He intended to intimidate me. Instead, he sounded like someone who had just realized he'd stepped into the wrong courtroom. 2 hours later, I heard Ethan pacing in the kitchen. "What do you mean there's a deed transfer?" "No, that's impossible." "No, she wouldn't have done that without telling me." He found me in the garage shortly after, not storming this time, not posturing, just standing there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Dad, what did you do?" I didn't answer. I simply opened the filing cabinet and placed the photocopied deed on the workbench. He picked it up slowly, like it might bite him. October 3rd. Witnessed. Notarized. Marisol's signature steady, deliberate. Why was the house in Mom's name?" he asked quietly. "For protection," I said. "And for clarity." He sat down hard into the decorative chair Lana had shoved into the garage last week. His fingers gripped the arms like he needed them to stay upright. "Okay, fine. The house was hers. She's gone. So it goes to me." "Not automatically." His face twitched. A flash of fear, the first honest emotion I'd seen from him in months. "Dad," he whispered. Mom didn't have a will. She never. She was too sick. She didn't. I opened the second drawer, placed the document on the table. Thicker. Stamped. Sealed. Ethan stared at it, as if it were a ghost. Mom wrote a will. I nodded. She insisted. He lifted the pages with shaking hands. His eyes moved, sentence by sentence, each line stripping color from his face. Then he reached the clause. The handwriting. Marisol's final decision. He read it aloud, barely a whisper. If my son, Ethan Hale, shows disrespect toward his father, if he attempts to displace him, if he treats his father's sacrifice with contempt, then the house shall be transferred to the Children's Haven Foundation. His voice cracked on the last words. Dad, this is because of what I said? The garage. No, I said quietly. It's because of everything you didn't see. He swallowed hard. His arrogance fell away in pieces, hitting the floor like broken glass. So, I really have to leave. You have 29 days. He put the will down with both hands, gently, like it was something alive. Dad, his voice was small. There has to be a way to fix this. There is, I said. He looked up suddenly, hope flaring in his eyes. But you're not going to like it. Because Ethan didn't know the whole truth yet. Not about the house. Not about Marisol. And definitely not about me. And the next revelation would destroy the rest of his world. Ethan didn't leave the garage right away. He just sat there, hands clasped, eyes unfocused, like a man trying to bargain with the floor. For the first time since Marisol died, he looked young again. Not innocent, just unprepared for the world. Dad, he finally whispered. What aren't you telling me? I didn't answer. Because if I spoke in that moment, I wasn't sure what would come out. Anger, grief, or something sharp enough to cut the space between us. So instead, I closed the filing cabinet and said, simply, you'll understand soon. But not here. Not now. He hated that answer, but fear kept him quiet. By the next afternoon, Ethan had mounted a counterattack the only way he knew how, with witnesses. When I walked into the living room, his support team was already seated. Aunt Meredith from Cedar Falls, Cousin Jonah, and even Mrs. Delaney from next door, hands folded over a foil-covered casserole like she'd been drafted into a jury. Lana sat beside Ethan on the couch, wearing one of Marisol's necklaces, a thin silver chain with a small turquoise stone. The necklace glinted against her sweater each time she shifted uncomfortably. The indent from the hospital bed still marked the carpet beside them. No one dared put their feet on it. Dad, Ethan said, clearing his throat. Listen, we all need to talk. Everyone's worried about you. Aunt Meredith nodded, performing concern. You've been through so much, Jacob. And Ethan says. Mrs. Delaney cut in softly. What he says isn't what I saw. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he pressed on, choosing confidence over caution. Look, the eviction notice, it wasn't necessary. It was emotional, not rational. I never intended for my dad to feel unwelcome. I didn't respond. That was the first time he used the word welcome in months. He took it as an invitation to continue. I think Dad misunderstood a lot of things. We were reorganizing, and maybe I came across wrong, but I was trying to keep the household functioning. I never disrespected him. Mrs. Delaney inhaled sharply at that, but stayed quiet. I stepped closer, not dramatically, just enough that the room shifted with me. Ethan, I said, if you want everyone to understand, let's be specific. He stiffened, but he kept his chin up. Fine, be specific. So I picked up the printed screenshots I'd placed on the side table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture. I placed the pages on the coffee table, one by one. Marisol's engagement ring, listed for far less than its appraisal. Her mother's brooch, described as estate piece, quick sale. Her 30th anniversary pearls, posted at 2 a.m. the night after our family dinner. The room went dead quiet. Ethan, Jonah muttered. Bro, come on. Ethan swallowed hard. Dad's finances, he can't afford. Someone had to. Someone had to what? I asked gently. Profit off your mother before the flowers died. Lana looked down. Her fingers pulled nervously at the turquoise pendant, the one she had no right to wear. Aunt Meredith stared at the listings. You put these up before Marisol's memorial was even over. It wasn't like that. Ethan insisted, voice cracking. I was helping. Dad can't maintain the mortgage. He can't. Ethan, I said quietly. Your mother used to hold that pearl necklace before every anniversary dinner. You listed it like it was a thrift store find. He had no comeback. Because there wasn't one. I didn't read the will aloud. I didn't need to. Instead, I handed Aunt Meredith the envelope with Marisol's handwritten letter, the one she'd insisted on writing through trembling fingers. The paper shook slightly in Meredith's hands as she read. If my son attempts to push Henry out of our home, if he treats Henry's sacrifice as disposable, then he has not learned what love requires. The house shall be transferred to the Children's Haven Foundation. Silence. Not angry silence. Not confused silence. The kind of silence that happens when everyone suddenly sees the truth they had been politely ignoring. Ethan looked at me then, not defiantly, not even apologetically, just shattered. Dad, his voice was barely audible. I didn't think. I didn't mean. You didn't think, I replied. That's the point. He covered his face with both hands. I can fix this. I'll bring everything back. I'll make it right. I'll talk to the foundation. I sat down across from him. You can correct your behavior, I said softly. You can apologize. You can become better. Then I paused. But the house is no longer part of your redemption. He froze. That was the moment he understood. This wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't anger. It was consequence. Real, irreversible consequence. His shoulders trembled. Not dramatically, just a small, involuntary shudder that made him look more human than he had in months. Lana touched his arm gently. He didn't even feel it. Everyone in that room had seen enough. Mrs. Delaney stood first, placing her casserole on the counter like an offering for a wound she couldn't bandage. Jonah exhaled and looked away from Ethan. Aunt Meredith closed the letter with trembling fingers and handed it back to me. Jacob, she said quietly, your wife was a wise woman. I nodded, but my throat tightened, because for a moment, just a second, her name on that page felt like a blade slicing through the months I'd spent keeping myself together. It was the first time I'd let myself feel it in front of anyone. Ethan saw the flicker, and it broke something in him. Dad, I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't respond, because there are apologies that fix things, and apologies that arrive too late to matter. As the family trickled out, I gathered the papers back into the envelope. When I reached the garage, I found something I did not expect. A large, official envelope shoved under the door. Not from Ethan. Not from the lawyer. Not from the foundation. The return address read, County Health Services, Private Medical Review. When I opened it and read the first sentence, my stomach dropped. Not for me. Not for Marisol. For Ethan. Because the next truth wasn't about the house. It was about him. And it changed everything. The envelope from County Health Services was so thin it felt almost harmless. But government envelopes rarely carry anything harmless. I stood alone in the garage, the cold concrete pulling the warmth out of my feet. For a moment, I hesitated, a real, trembling hesitation, because something about the return address made my stomach tighten. I slid a thumb under the seal. The letter unfolded crisply, like a formal apology from a stranger. My eyes landed on the first line. Confirming your authority regarding the behavioral and competency evaluation for Ethan Hale. My grip tightened involuntarily. A pulse of heat rose behind my ribs. Confusion, fear, anger, guilt, all tangled and sharp. I hadn't filed any behavioral request for Ethan. Marisol certainly couldn't have, not in her last weeks. So who? A soft shuffle behind me made me turn. Ethan stood in the doorway, pale, bracing himself with one hand on the frame, as if he expected the garage to collapse on him. You got it, he said quietly. Not defiant. Not angry. Just scared. I folded the letter. Why is the county evaluating you? He took a deep breath, the kind people take before admitting something painful. Dad, I need to tell you what happened, but not with everyone watching. Not after yesterday. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't want answers, but because something inside me was bracing for the truth, and I wasn't sure how solid that part of me still was. Ethan stepped in slowly, careful not to touch the boxes with Marisol's handwriting scrawled across them. There's something you didn't know, he began. About me. And about Mom. The garage seemed to shrink around us. 6 weeks before she passed, she called County Health Services. I blinked. Hard. What? My voice cracked. A quiet, raw sound I hadn't made in months. Ethan nodded, eyes lowered. She asked them to open a preliminary behavioral assessment. On me. The paper in my hand felt heavier than any medical bill I had ever carried. Why? I whispered. It came out smaller than I intended. He swallowed, voice trembling. Because of the day I yelled at her. My heart dropped. Which day? I already feared the answer. Ethan looked sick. It was the night she couldn't keep anything down. She needed you, but you were at the pharmacy dealing with insurance. She asked me to pick up her anti-nausea meds. I'd just gotten home. Long day, bad meetings. And she said she was sorry to keep needing help. His hands trembled as he continued. And I lost it. I told her she was making everything worse. That she didn't appreciate what I'd given up. I said awful things, Dad. Things I didn't mean. Things she didn't deserve. I closed my eyes as a wave of guilt punched through me. I remembered that night. The door closed, her muffled crying. I thought it was pain. It wasn't. She had been afraid. Ethan's voice cracked again. She called them the next morning. Said she was worried I'd lose control again. That she wanted a support system in place if she got worse. He exhaled shakily. I only found out because they contacted me after she passed. And then contacted you. Because without her, you're next of kin. You're responsible for answering. I felt something inside me fracture. A sharp, internal snap I couldn't hide. A memory flashed. Marisol squeezing my hand in the hospital bed, telling me Ethan would need guidance someday. She wasn't talking about finances. She was talking about this. Dad, Ethan whispered. The county said if I had one more documented act of aggression, especially toward a vulnerable relative, they might step in. They don't play around with that. His eyes flicked to the garage cot behind me. The night I told you to sleep out here. That counts, doesn't it? A part of me wanted to shout. Another part wanted to collapse. Instead, I sank onto the workbench stool because my knees genuinely threatened to give out. For months, I had carried the guilt of failing Marisol at the end. Now I learned I had failed her long before. I should have seen this, I murmured. The words escaped without permission. I should have noticed. I should have helped you both. Ethan stepped forward instinctively, then stopped himself, unsure of his place in the room. Dad, I'm not asking you to make excuses for me. I know I've been awful. To you. To her memory. To myself. He wiped a sleeve across his eyes. But this evaluation? It's serious. And I don't know how to face it alone. You're the only one they'll listen to. You're the only one who can respond. He wasn't lying. He wasn't bargaining. He was pleading. Not for the house. Not for inheritance. For help. For the first time, I saw the boy Marisol used to scold gently when he acted out in school. The boy who panicked when he broke a neighbor's window. The boy who wanted approval more than anything. Now terrified of becoming someone dangerous. And suddenly the consequences of the will didn't feel like justice. They felt like a crossroads. I opened my mouth to speak, but the garage door creaked open. Mrs. Delaney stood there, breathless, holding her phone like a flare in the dark. Jacob, she said urgently, you need to hear this. She stepped inside and pressed play. And then, Marisol's voice, weaker than I remembered yet unmistakably hers, drifted into the garage. Soft, tired, afraid, loving. Henry, if you're hearing this, something has happened. Ethan's breath caught. Mine did too, because whatever came next was going to change everything. Marisol's voice filled the garage like a hand reaching through time. Not fragile, not fading, but steady, heartbreakingly steady, as if she'd saved every last coherent breath for this message. Mrs. Delaney held her phone out between us, fingers trembling like she didn't want to be too close to what came next. The voicemail began. Henry, it's me. My heart stopped. Ethan stiffened, his shoulders drawing tight like he'd been struck. I'm having a clear day. I wanted to say this while I still can. A rush of memories hit me. The rare mornings when her eyes were bright again, when she ate a full meal, when she remembered things she'd lost the night before. Those days were gold, painful and precious. Henry, I need you to listen without protecting me. I swallowed hard. She only used that tone when she was afraid. I'm worried about our son. The garage seemed to absorb the words, letting them settle like dust. Ethan's breath faltered. Marisol continued. He snapped at me last night. Not physically, just words. But they shook me. Ethan's hand went to his mouth. He turned away, but his shoulders quivered. I don't blame him. He's grieving already. He's overwhelmed. He's scared of losing me and scared of what comes next. My throat tightened. I'd missed this. All of it. I was at the pharmacy, on the phone with insurance, paying bills, doing the right things, and missing the important ones. But Henry, you weren't here, and he broke in a way I didn't expect. Guilt hit me so hard I had to sit down. She kept speaking, her voice tender and pained. If something happens to me, Ethan will lash out. Not because he's cruel, but because he doesn't know what to do with fear. He'll say things he regrets. He'll push you away. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, breath shaking. Henry, you must set boundaries. Even if it feels cruel. Even if he calls you cold. My eyes blurred. She had seen all of this coming. I love him. God, I love him. But love doesn't erase consequences. Ethan let out a choked sound. And then, the line that cut straight through both of us. Don't let my death make you his victim. Don't let guilt turn into permission. My hands trembled. Openly. It wasn't the first time she'd worried about me, but it was the first time she'd ever said it aloud. Help him, but not at the expense of yourself. Her breath hitched, almost imperceptibly, but her voice still held firm conviction. If he crosses a line, you know what we agreed on. You know what I signed. You know what? My breath caught. The will. The condition. The transfer. She had meant every word. And finally, barely above a whisper. I trust you. I trust you to know when he's a scared boy, and when he's a man making choices. The message ended. The silence afterward was brutal. Mrs. Delaney lowered her phone slowly. Her eyes glistened, but she said nothing, only nodded once and stepped outside, closing the door behind her. Ethan sank onto the folding chair across from me, elbows on his knees, staring at the oil-stained concrete. Dad, he whispered. She was afraid of me. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was horrified. I felt myself inhale, shaky, uneven. She wasn't afraid of who you are, I said quietly. She was afraid of who grief might turn you into. He shook his head. No. She said boundaries. She said cruelty. She was warning you about me. His voice cracked. He looked like a man watching the worst version of himself replay in his mind. I didn't touch her. I swear to God, Dad, I didn't. But his jaw tightened. I yelled. I lost it. I scared her. He wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, then stared at the floor again. That night, he whispered, I saw her flinch and I hated myself. I hated everything. And I didn't say anything. I didn't apologize. I just pretended it didn't happen. He dragged his hands through his hair, trembling. I thought if I ignored it, it wasn't real. I exhaled a slow, painful breath. That's not an excuse, I said gently, but softly, because he already knew that. He nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. I don't want to be like that, he said. I don't want to be what she thought I might become. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I understood. He wasn't just ashamed. He was terrified of himself. And I felt something crack inside me, grief, guilt, anger, love, all tangled. Because Marisol was right. She wasn't just afraid of his outbursts. She was afraid of what I might do if I let guilt control me. If I forgot to protect myself. If I let him hurt me the way he'd hurt her. Ethan's voice lowered. Dad, am I broken? The question tore through me. I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because the wrong answer could destroy him. You're not broken, I said. But you need help. Real help. Not excuses. Not denial. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know. And I can't fix you. I know that too. Silence stretched between us, fragile, painful. Then he asked the question I had been avoiding since the voicemail began. Will you answer the county report? Everything went still. Not about the house. Not the will. Not the eviction. This was about responsibility. About his future. About mine. Dad, will you help me? Or will you let them take over? His eyes were searching mine, terrified but honest. And for the first time in months, he wasn't demanding anything from me. He was asking. I didn't speak yet, because Marisol's words still echoed through me. Help him, but not at the cost of yourself. And I didn't know which side of that line we were standing on. Before I could decide, before either of us could breathe, a sharp knock rattled the garage door. Not polite, not neighborly, official. The knock came again. Mr. Hale? County Health Services. We need to speak with you both. Ethan's face drained. My heart pounded once hard. The past wasn't done with either of us. Not yet. The knock at the garage door was soft, but it carried weight. Not anger. Not urgency. Just inevitability. Ethan stiffened like someone had poured ice water down his spine. I stood. My legs felt heavier than the last time I used them. He stayed planted on the folding chair, staring at the door as if it might rip open on its own. Another knock. Mr. Hale? County Health Services. The words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like a verdict arriving gently, which somehow felt worse. I opened the door. Two people stood beside my driveway. A woman in her 50s, calm eyes, steady posture. The kind of person who could talk someone off a ledge or into a hospital without raising her voice. A young man beside her carried a small messenger bag and an anxious expression. He looked like this might be his third week on the job. The woman offered a professional smile. "Mr. Hale? I'm Supervisor Karen Lance. This is my colleague, Daniel. We're here for a wellness check regarding a report we received." "Come in," I said quietly. Ethan stayed frozen, hands twisted in his lap. Lance scanned the garage with a soft, assessing gaze. The cot, the cold lamp, the boxes of Marisol's things, the heater humming in the corner. The life of a man displaced inside his own home. Nothing in her eyes judged me, and that alone almost undid me. "I'd like to speak with you first," she said gently. "Daniel will talk with Ethan outside. Just a few questions." Ethan hesitated, then looked at me. I nodded. He swallowed and followed the young man out to the driveway. When the door closed, Lance turned her attention fully to me. "Mr. Hale," she said softly, "I am very sorry for your loss." The kindness hit harder than any confrontation. "Thank you," I murmured. Her eyes softened further as she took in the room. The grief, the exhaustion, the arrangement that should never have existed. "This must be incredibly painful," she said. It was the first true understatement I'd heard in months. She folded her hands. "I need to ask you something directly. Do you feel safe living with your son right now?" Not an accusation, not suspicion, a careful, necessary question. I let out a slow breath. "It depends on the day." Lance didn't flinch. She just waited, giving space for honesty. "Ethan," I continued, "he's not violent. Not in that way. But he's overwhelmed. He's lost. And when he gets scared, he says things he shouldn't. Does things he regrets." Lance nodded slowly. "Has he ever frightened you emotionally?" I didn't answer right away. I thought of the garage cot, the dismissal in his voice, the jewelry listings, the contempt, the indifference. And then I thought of the voicemail, Marisol's fear hiding beneath her love. Finally, I said, "Yes." Lance wrote nothing. She simply studied me, as if trying to understand the shape of what I carried. "And have you ever feared for him?" she asked. The question pierced straight through me. Because if I was honest, brutally honest, yes, fear for who grief would turn him into. Fear for what he would do to himself. Fear for what he already regretted. "Sometimes," I whispered. Lance nodded once, the kind of nod that signaled she'd seen this many times, and it never got easier. A few minutes later, the garage door opened again. Ethan stood there, looking smaller somehow. Not physically, but in spirit. Face blotched from crying. Hands twisting together. Daniel hovered behind him, concern written on his face. Lance addressed Ethan gently. "Ethan, thank you for talking with us." He nodded without lifting his eyes. "We're not here to punish you," she continued. "We're here to ensure both of you have the support you need." Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't want to lose control again," he whispered. Lance didn't respond to the confession, not directly. She looked between us now, her voice careful. "You two are grieving the same woman, but not at the same pace, and not in the same direction." That line hit harder than it should have. She continued, "I want to offer you two paths. One is voluntary, therapy, support, anger management, grief counseling. It won't follow you. It won't define you, but it does require full commitment." Ethan's breath caught. "And the other?" he asked. Lance exhaled slowly. "If I believe safety is uncertain, I have to recommend an involuntary psychiatric evaluation." The air tightened. Ethan's eyes widened, not in anger, but in fear. "I'm not dangerous," he whispered hurriedly. "I swear I'm not. I'm messed up right now. I yelled. I regret it. I regret everything. Please don't." Lance lifted a hand gently. "Ethan, this isn't a punishment. It's a safety measure, for you and your father." He shook his head, trembling. "I can get better. I want to get better. I lost control. But I'm not a threat. Please." She didn't answer him. Her eyes were on me instead. "Mr. Hale," she said quietly, "you know him better than anyone. You know what grief has done to him. And to you." I felt something heavy shift inside my chest. "But I need to know one thing from you," she continued. "And this has to come from truth. Not guilt, not fear, not love." Her voice softened. "We need to decide whether Ethan is safe to remain here with you while pursuing voluntary treatment." Ethan stared at me, every part of him shaking. "Dad," he whispered. "Please. I'm trying. I'm not. I'm not who I was last month. I want to get better. But I wasn't looking at him. I was hearing Marisol. Help him, but not at the cost of yourself. Lance stepped a little closer. Mr. Hale, she said gently. Do you trust him to stay here safely while he gets help? Silence filled the garage like water rising. I felt it in my lungs, in my bones, in the places Marisol used to touch when she needed reassurance. After a long moment, longer than felt humane, I spoke. My voice cracked. I don't know. Ethan let out a sound that didn't belong to a grown man. Lance didn't react with surprise, only understanding. All right, she said softly. Then I have to ask you one final question. I looked up. Her eyes were steady, calm, warm. Mr. Hale. A pause. Supervisor Lance's question still hung in the air like a blade suspended by a single thread. Mr. Hale, do you feel safe tonight? Ethan stared at me, wide-eyed and shaking, his hands twisted together so tightly the knuckles had gone white. For a heartbeat, I considered lying. I could feel it, the instinct to protect him, to protect myself, to protect the memory of the life we used to have. A life where Marisol's laughter filled this garage, where her shampoo smelled like orange blossoms, where she'd touch my forearm lightly whenever she wanted my attention. The memory hit me so hard my chest tightened. I swallowed, opened my mouth, closed it again. Lance didn't move. She didn't push. She simply waited, steady and silent, the way someone waits for a truth a person has avoided too long. Ethan's voice came out small, barely a whisper. Dad, don't. Not demanding, not entitled, just scared. And I realized the truth wasn't simple. I wasn't afraid he would hurt me. I was afraid he would collapse under his own weight, and I wouldn't be able to lift him. I was afraid of losing him to the same grief that stole his mother. I was afraid I'd been so far trying to save him that I'd break myself. So when I finally spoke, it wasn't loud. It wasn't brave. It was honest. No. Ethan's breath caught like he'd been punched. I forced myself to continue, because stopping now would make the truth cruel instead of necessary. But it's not because you want to hurt me, I said. My voice cracked. It's because when you spiral, you don't see anything. Not me. Not yourself. Not the edge you're running toward. Ethan shook his head in short, frantic jerks. I'm trying. I can no. I don't. His words fell apart. He looked like a child trapped in a grown man's body, terrified of a monster he couldn't see but knew lived inside him. Lance absorbed all of this with quiet gravity. Thank you, Mr. Hale, she said softly. She turned to Ethan. We're not removing you from the home. Not tonight. Relief flickered across his face, then vanished as she continued. But you can't stay here tonight. He blinked, confused, then afraid. Wait, what? Why? This is my house. Lance shook her head gently. This is your father's home. And right now, he is grieving a woman you both loved. You're grieving her too. But you're grieving in different ways. Ways that are hurting both of you. Ethan's jaw trembled. So what? You're kicking me out. The word stabbed, but I forced myself not to flinch. No, I said. I'm giving us both one night to breathe. One night where nothing breaks worse. He blinked rapidly. I can stay with a friend. Aunt Meredith. Anyone. Just not someplace. We need a neutral space, Lance said gently. Not a punishment. A pause. Ethan shook his head, tears slipping. I'm not crazy, he whispered. No one said you were, she replied. He looked at me then. Really looked. Dad, please. Don't send me away. Not tonight. There was a moment, brief, fragile, where I saw the boy he used to be. The one who brought me dandelions from the yard. The one who cried when he accidentally broke Marisol's favorite mug. The one who always crawled into our bed during thunderstorms. That boy was still in there, buried under grief and fear and guilt. He reached out, hesitant, trembling, and took my hand. Please, he whispered. Don't give up on me. I'm trying. I'm really trying. My throat closed. I squeezed his hand back. I know, I said. I know you are. But my voice broke as I added. And that's why we need this. One night. Just one. So we don't hurt each other worse. His face crumpled. He nodded, barely, but it was enough. Lance exhaled quietly, relief in her eyes. I'll escort you to the stabilization center, she said softly. You'll have a private room. It's quiet. Staff check-ins only. You can call your father in the morning. Ethan stood, unsteady. He didn't look back at me as he walked toward the house to grab a jacket. The door closed behind him with a sound that echoed too loudly in the garage. Lance stepped beside me. You did the hardest thing, she said gently. You told the truth. I shook my head, tears burning behind my eyes. No, I whispered. The hardest thing is tomorrow. She didn't argue, because she understood. She left with Daniel to wait for Ethan outside. I sank into the folding chair, the same one I'd slept in, eaten in, cried in, and the garage felt emptier than it ever had. The scent of orange blossom shampoo drifted through my memory again, and Marisol's voice, steady, loving, unyielding, echoed through the quiet. Help him, but not at the cost of yourself. Tonight, for the first time, I finally understood what she meant. And tomorrow I would have to decide whether saving my son meant holding on tighter or letting go just enough for him to learn to stand. The house was silent after they drove away. Not peaceful, not comforting, just the kind of silence that makes every memory louder. The hum of the refrigerator, the click of the furnace, the faint scent of Marisol's lavender lotion lingering in the hallway, the scent I'd been avoiding for months. I stood there for a long moment, staring down the hall toward our old bedroom, and then I finally walked toward it. The door creaked open softly, a sound that hit me harder than I expected. Her sweater still hung over the chair. Her small stack of books still sat on the nightstand. The indent on her pillow, faint but unmistakable, felt like a bruise pressed into time. I sat on the edge of the bed and laid my hand on her side of the mattress. The quilt she'd sewn, hand-stitched through chemo, between treatments, on nights she couldn't sleep, felt warm under my palm, as if it remembered her. A tiny breath escaped me. I'm trying, I whispered to the empty room. I hope it's enough. For the first time in months, I let tears fall without wiping them away. Outside, the garage door clicked. Lance's car engine hummed. Then silence again. This time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. Just truth. I didn't sleep. Morning came in pale blue light as I sat on the couch holding a mug of cold coffee I hadn't touched. At 7:12 a.m., the phone rang. Unknown caller. My chest tightened, but I answered. Mr. Hale, Lance said gently, he's awake. My voice barely worked. How is he? He slept. He's calmer this morning. He asked if you were up. A breath I'd been holding released in a shaky exhale. I'm here, I said. One moment, I'll transfer him. A click. Silence. Then, Dad. The word wasn't broken like last night. Just tired. Human. I'm here, I whispered. Another pause, and then, thank you. For being honest. Even when it hurt. Something inside me cracked, soft but deep. You don't have to thank me, I said. Yes, I do. He took a shaky breath. I want help. For real this time. I don't want to be the man Mom worried about. His voice wavered. This time, not from fear, but from clarity. I closed my eyes. She wasn't afraid of you, I said quietly. She was afraid of losing you before she could help you find your footing. Silence. Then, can you come get me? I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to. Because I knew Marisol's voice mattered here too. So I steadied myself and said, I can, but we need rules first. Okay. You don't raise your voice. Not once. Not at me. Not at yourself. Okay. You go to therapy. Consistently. No disappearing. I won't. You don't pretend you're fine just so I'll relax. Another pause, then a soft, honest. Okay. I swallowed. And Ethan, my guilt is not your shield anymore. A long silence. Then he said, quieter than before. I know. It was the first time he'd ever truly understood that. I'm on my way, I said. And he let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. The stabilization center didn't look like a facility, just a small brick building with warm lights spilling onto a quiet parking lot. Ethan stood outside in a borrowed jacket, hands tucked in his pockets, shoulders slumped, but standing. He walked to the car slowly, carefully, as if afraid sudden movement would break something fragile between us. When he got in, he didn't speak, not for a full minute. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something in my hand. Marisol's necklace. I shouldn't have taken it, he whispered. I closed my fingers around the pendant, cold metal warming instantly against my skin. Thank you, I said. No lecture. No punishment. Just truth. He nodded. We drove home in quiet. But this silence didn't choke. It simply breathed. At a stoplight, he spoke. Remember when Mom used to put this necklace on while you made coffee? I nodded, surprised by the memory he chose. Gentle, ordinary, alive. Yeah, I said softly. She always asked if it was straight. And you always said it was, he murmured, almost smiling. Even when it wasn't. Something warm and painful tightened in my chest. We didn't say anything else the rest of the drive. We didn't need to. We stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door together. A slow, hesitant walk, like two people relearning the weight of their steps. Ethan paused on the porch. Dad, what if I mess up again? I looked at him, not at the shame on his face or the fear in his eyes. I looked at my son. You will, I said. His breath hitched. And when you do, I continued, we won't hide it. We deal with it. Honestly. With help. With space. With boundaries. And with care. Not fear. He swallowed hard. Okay. We stepped inside. I didn't go to the garage. He didn't go to the bedroom. We simply stood in the center of our home, the home Marisol loved, the home she tried to protect with her last ounce of clarity. Her voice echoed in my mind, steady and warm. Help him, but not at the cost of yourself. For the first time, I finally understood what she really meant. She didn't ask me to choose between him and me. She asked me to choose a way. We could both survive the weight of losing her. So we began. Not healed, not whole, but together. Trembling, grieving, trying.